time, we're going to start with what we call a task analysis. Task analysis is, as such, breaking a complex skill or series of behaviors into smaller teachable units, smaller components of a bigger sequence. Hence the word, what we decided to call the presentation, task sequences. So we're looking at things that all fit together. It's a chain, right? Little things that are all linked, and it turns out to be one particular behavior, not one little response. There's lots of little components within it, but it's going to be breaking a complex skill down into smaller teachable units. Sometimes the bigger unit is just too big to teach. It's not within the person's skill set at the start. So the product of a task analysis, what you get as a result, is a series of ordered sequential steps. And I'll talk about the sequence, because in general the sequence is important. But occasionally there's steps within the sequence. It's not that important if step 13 and 12 are interchanged, because maybe you can go get the spatula out and then the pot and still get it to the end result. But if you turn, put the pan on and take the pan off, then put the fire on, and you're not going to really cook the item. So some steps are important in the sequence to be in that particular order. So I'm going to give you a little preview of the forwards, the backwards, and the total task here, because we will be reviewing which one you might select. So this is going to be a very basic part of our presentation tonight, which is when we're going to teach the sequence, we are going to decide if we teach it forward, backwards, or in total task format. If that just sounds like Greek, it's fine. We're going to spend some time on what it is. These are some basic teaching options of chaining. And when we are going to use chaining or using the task sequence, we're going to use what we call our task analysis. We're going to analyze and break down that skill. So that said, again, as defined, chaining is a specific sequence of discrete responses, 1 little, 2 little, 3 little, all makes up the same, a bigger behavior. Each is associated with a certain, let's call it, stimulus condition. I will describe this in a second. And when the components are linked together, they form a chain, and then you get an outcome at the very end. And here's the possible outcomes. The shoe is tied. Dinner's made. The chore is done. They've taken out the trash. The night routine is completed. The child's in their bed, lights off. Child's dressed. You guys, somebody asked about the morning routine or whatnot there. Some other examples that the bed is made. The person arrives at work on time, because we've done in the last year a task analysis that has to do with using public transportation for an older person. So the second point about each is associated with a particular stimulus condition goes right in with the next slide. Now this is going to be a little bit of technicality for the next two. It's not so much make it or break it, but I think you guys that really want to understand and kind of go beyond the science might help to see this part. Each response in the chain, each little part in the chain, serves as both a reinforcer for the one that preceded it, the little step that preceded it, and the response in the chain, that same one, also serves as a cue for the next step in the chain. Okay, an example I would give you is if you get in your car, put the key in the engine, put your seatbelt on, move the shift into reverse or drive or whatever. All of those, there's 4 little steps there. Each step, because you've done it historically so many times, each step cues you to do the next one. And because you're already at the next one, it reinforces the prior one. So it's the part of the practice and the reinforcement of chaining and how it all works. So there's another little slide that goes into that. And look at that first sentence. It's basically fixing yourself a bowl of cereal. So you see the establishing operation here, meaning what makes that response even more motivating. Basically the absence of food for 2 hours. So there's hunger here. All right. So the SD would be that mom says, fix yourself a bowl of cereal. The child gets cereal from the cupboard, gets milk from the refrigerator, gets a bowl from the cupboard, and you see on your slides, I hope, the little arrows that mysteriously disappeared from the slide. I don't know where they went. But basically you can see how one is the perceives, one, and serves as a reinforcer for this one, and then basically the one that's after it basically reinforces the prior one. So if you think about that getting in the car and starting the engine scenario, it probably gives you an idea of how chaining works and what establishes as a chain as you're teaching it. Ah, there they are. Ah, and there they are. Okay, so the rationale for chaining teaches complex skills that allow the individual to function independently. I think that because we even termed our presentation task sequences for independence, you know that we expect the task sequence to lead to independence. Certainly is the whole rationale behind it, is that we want the person to be independent. And if they keep looking back at the teacher or the adult, then we are teaching it improperly. Or we should probably be looking at our materials and saying, maybe the materials need to be modified and there's something about the materials that are a little bit confusing. So it shouldn't be the case that the schedule alone doesn't do the work, because we want the schedule alone to do the work. And it's also a way to add new behaviors to an existing behavior repertoire. So to develop more skills when you already have little components in there, you have a little piece in there. They come home and they take off their jacket. Hey, couldn't they come home and take off their jacket, unload their backpack, lunch bag in the kitchen, get their own snack and start making a bagel, which I do have a task analysis I'll show you. I guess I could start passing this around because I do have several examples. This was a program that we did about 3 years ago for a family that said, we always talk about quality of life. What would be the place to start? Which would make things really great in your family? Like, what's a priority here? If mom and dad said, if we could just sleep late in the morning and the person got up and made their own breakfast, minus any kind of cookie, but my child loves bagels. And this was a child that had limited verbal means. And so we ended up taking photographic representations, pictures of the entire chain, but we had to have some discussion about, well, what do you use? Do you use butter or cream cheese? Where do you keep it? What does your toaster look like? I'm not going to go and pull off images off the internet that don't look like what's in the child's home or what the parent would like to see happen. And so we ended up taking photographs, and then they also said it'd be great if my child could brush his teeth. Another's chain. So we taught that, and then what we ended up doing is putting them in a sequence here where it's make the bagel, brush teeth. And so they got linked together as two schedules, became a bigger schedule. And ironically, what ended up being the biggest reinforcer, we had a lot of like, is this right? Is an jelly bean was the biggest reinforcer for the child. And I'm like, wait a minute, eat a bagel, brush your teeth, get a jelly bean? I don't know about that order. But it was so motivating to the child, and they said, you know what, a half jelly bean or whatever, that's good, that's good. We're going to fade that out over time. So you'll see that the schedule ends with a picture of the jelly bean. And I will pass this around as an example.